Ladies and gentlemen, my name is TotalBiscuit. I'm here to ask and answer one simple question. WTF is a Battlefield Hardline. It's the latest in the annual iteration of Battlefield games. Thank you. Go away. That is this time brought to you by Visceral, the developers of Dead Space, which is a little bit unusual. It's not actually a DICE-developed game this time around, which you might find perhaps a little odd. But it would appear that the duties have been handed over, at least this time, to Visceral. That is a studio that works with EA quite often. And they've produced this time around a police-themed version using the same engine, uses Frostbite 3, just like all of the other recent Battlefield games. And it really is the annual franchise iteration, I suppose. It's probably the fairest way to describe it. I don't think it's an unreasonable thing to call it. Half the house fell down. That's a bit unfortunate, but never mind. Now, I did get an unlock for my SPAS, actually, and if I... there we go, yes. I wanted to switch out to reflex sights, and I'm gonna pop on a laser sight there as well. Might as well have a look at the loadout screen before we fight anymore. Not really much to say about it, honestly. It's not a particularly complex loadout screen, and there really aren't all that many weapons per class. As you can see, the Enforcer here has this many weapons, 5 as a choice for primary, 2 battle rifles and 3 shotguns, one of which has to be unlocked via the Enforcer Syndicate, which is an assignment that you unlock after a bunch of other stuff. The Enforcer Syndicate requires a fairly ludicrous amount of work to actually unlock, so really, for a long time, you're going to be stuck with 2 weapons. And this is a criminal weapon, the SPAS 12. The SPAS 12 is not available on the Enforcer side unless you have, I believe there's a weapon license you can get, which supposedly allows you to use it on both sides, but how you get that weapons license, I believe it's a fairly ludicrous amount of grinding and experience. In fact, on the other side, you have access to the Stakeout, which I don't like at all, and is nowhere near as good as the SPAS, so we'll get onto the problem of asymmetry a little bit later. But outside of that, you're able to equip a secondary weapon, which is essentially 3 pistols, a taser, and a tracking dart. That's about all that's available. Depending on what class, you do get some different choices of secondaries. For instance, if you switch out to the Professional, the secondary of the, which if it actually selects, the Professional of the secondary is either a small SMG or kind of personal defense weapon, or the Glock 18C, which is actually fully automatic. So you can nab the Tech 9 or the Mac 10, which inexplicably can be used by the Enforcers as well. I don't believe I've ever seen a police unit use a Mac 10, but there you go. And you also have access to 2 gadgets, and they come from a small selection depending on what you happen to be going with. So you can get things like stealth training for the Enforcer, which lets you sneak around a bit. You can then grab a zip line, or you can grab stunt driver, which makes you a little bit better in cars, and you can get things like cameras and decoys. It really depends which class you go on. There is a decent amount of class diversity, but simultaneously, the class diversity comes from exactly the same place as it comes from in every other Battlefield game. They stick with some very standard classes, and the Operator being arguably the most ubiquitous, the most powerful, and the most useful, because they have a bunch of assault rifles, which are all very, very good, and are good in pretty much every situation. I mean, you've got good range on these things, you've got good stopping power, they can fight at close range, long range, you know, they've got a high rate of fire, they're very easy to use, and you have resurrection. You know, you can revive people, simple as that, you know. You've got your first aid pack and your revival, so this is the most useful to allow for sustained squad combat, because the good old Battlefield trick of soldiers popping out of the arse of other soldiers and squads with the respawn mechanics is right back where you would expect it to be. Okay, let's switch back to Enforcer, which is the class that I've been sort of struggling to play a little bit. I've got to be honest. I mean, I love shotguns, don't get me wrong. They're a lot of fun, but from what I can tell, I'm probably going to have to end up switching to a slug if I want to really do anything. I was able to pick someone off there, but I then got immediately killed. The shotguns, they're fairly fun to use, but I really only like using the shotguns on the criminal side because the Stakeout isn't that much fun, and the 870 Magnum, which is the shot you can use on both sides, a very slow pump action, which I'm not really a big fan of. With the time to kill in Battlefield at close range, what you're probably gonna end up finding is that please tell me that's friendly. It's not. It's alright, we'll get him anyway. What you're probably going to find is that if you miss the first shot with a pump-action shotgun in a close-range firefight, you're dead. It's that simple, and there's not really much else to say about it. which is why a lot of people use assault rifles. It's why the operators are very popular. The mechanic has some sabotage abilities and things like a grenade launcher, which is generally used for anti-vehicle, but strangely enough, this particular variant of Battlefield is actually more infantry-focused than previous Battlefields. And I suppose you could argue that that might be a good thing, depending on how you like your Battlefield. I've got to admit, to some degree, I do see why they did that. And I can also see why some people would appreciate it. I found myself getting a bit frustrated with Battlefield 4, where I'd spawn and just get blown up by a tank or a jeep or whatever. But simultaneously, it's a combined arms game. That's the kind of thing that you expect. That's what makes Battlefield special in comparison to other titles. That's what makes it a different game to Call of Duty. It doesn't focus on the infantry combat all that much. It focuses on the idea of combined arms, the necessity of vehicles. Where is he? Where is he? Did he go that way? Where'd he go? And the necessity of vehicles really isn't here. In fact, they kind of shoehorned it into one of the modes. It's necessary for transport only. Most of the weapons don't have... Most of the vehicles in Hardline don't actually have weapons on them. Which makes sense, I suppose, if you're talking about a cops and robbers game. Although the vehicles that do have weapons on them are fairly ludicrous. I mean, I'm fairly sure that the police don't have access to helicopters with miniguns, for instance. Although with the current state of police in the US, it might actually be true. You also have SUVs that are armed with things like miniguns and heavy machine guns, which is in itself a fairly ludicrous thing. And I can understand them sort of exaggerating things a bit, but simultaneously, I think it actually ends up working to the detriment of the game, because it really does end up being a sort of a second-rate Battlefield experience, because you simply have less interesting equipment than the military forces do in the other Battlefield games that have a wide variety of vehicles and weapons to use. And we already talked about weapon variety. It's not very high in this game. It really is not. Compared to previous Battlefield games, there are less guns. Now, they do have asymmetry this time around, meaning that there are... Basically, for each class, there is, like, one primary, and I believe also, like, one secondary, which is different depending on which faction you happen to be a part of. Now, that sounds great in theory, until you realize the problem with that is that half the time you don't get to use the weapons you actually paid for and unlocked, which is a genuine problem. Like, the SPAS 12 is a weapon that I've invested time in, and I'm getting decently good at it, and I like the way that it handles and its rate of fire and things like that. But I don't get to use it, which kind of sucks, frankly. I would like to be able to use the weapon that I've practiced with and that I find enjoyable, because I've gone through the weapons and this one is fun. But I don't get to do that half the time. And that's the problem with asymmetry in first-person shooters when it comes to weapon loadouts, and it's why a lot of first-person shooters don't use asymmetry, and it's probably for the best. And that's because of auto balance. It's that simple. You don't really get to choose which faction you play on. You choose whatever faction has the least people on it, and that's the way the server balances you out. So, if you actually have a system, thank you very much, and that's the winner, there you go. Nice, didn't do too badly there, did I? That was actually not too shabby for someone that was talking and trying to not suck. I'll take the credit for that one, thank you very much. Ding ding. And we'll get a bunch of cash and progression and so on and so forth. You might have noticed there is a cash system in the game. So, you unlock weapons and gadgets with cash, but you unlock attachments based on number of kills. And then there's some weapons that you have to unlock with assignments. So there's a kind of triple progression thing going on there, which is a little silly, frankly. I don't like the idea that you have to wait a certain number of kills to get attachments for weapons. I've never liked that idea, because I hate the notion that when you buy a new weapon, it's inherently worse than the weapons that you previously had. It's a problem that Battlefield and COD have been wrestling with for a while. I genuinely believe the best way is to have a unified currency that can be used for everything. So if you want to invest your currency on a gun and a bunch of attachments for it, then so be it. It means you have access to less variety. You see, now I'm on the other side, and I can't use the shotgun that I want to use. So, you know, we're back to the same kind of problem. So I'm going to have to stick with the Magnum, which is, frankly, not a shotgun that I really like. And also, annoyingly enough, the progress on my other shotgun doesn't count towards this. So I don't get to use anything other than the tactical light and the standard things. I do at least have optics for it, but hey, I don't like these sort of triple currency progression systems. I think they're ultimately unnecessary, and I think the asymmetry hurts the game. As I said, you lose access to weapons you like using, so you end up in a situation where the combat's less fun, and you're just not as good at it, because, you know, once you get used to a weapon, you want to use it because you become proficient at it, and you've got all the add-ons you want for it. Instead of just using another weapon that you don't have the add-ons for. It's like, hey, here's sights that I don't like, an add-on that I find useless, and the kind of ammunition that I don't want to use. So, you know, I just don't think it's a very good idea. Now, what about the game and the accusations that it is basically DLC for Battlefield? Well, you know what? A lot of the time, I like to avoid those particular accusations because I think they are often overblown and they lack nuance most of the time. But you know what? This time around, I'm actually going to agree with what people said. This really feels like DLC for Battlefield 4. I mean, obviously it uses the same engine, the combat is extremely similar, and I think if they diversified the game modes to the point where games were actually really, really different to Battlefield, and the most popular mode wasn't frickin' Conquest, then you might have a good argument to say, look, no, this is a totally different game, you know, they've done a lot of different things with it, that's really differentiated it. Well, the thing is, they haven't. They really, truly have not, in my view, done that. And that's the real problem. So the game mode that I'm playing at the moment goes by the name of Blood Money, which is essentially kind of a capture the flag sort of mode, where you get money and you take it to your vault. You can also steal money from the enemy's vault. And it's one of the more diverse modes in the game. There's also Heist, which is my favorite, which involves unlocking 2 vaults. And then once you've unlocked the vaults, you try and take the... I can't even get on the bloody steps. Thank you very much. Thank you. There we go. That's my vault. Why they'd leave it there, I really don't know. But hey, we're just going to go with it. Because why not? Get back here. Oh, I guess I'll just use the van. Why not? Oh, ow, 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 ow. Bollocks. Heist is pretty fun. And there's also one called Hotwire. Now, a lot of people raved about Hotwire during the beta. I personally don't like it that much. And the reason is that while it's an interesting idea, the fact is that vehicles are capture points and you have to keep driving really fast in order to earn points. So it's supposed to encourage car chases. But it really kind of doesn't. In my experience, what it encourages is someone to get up in the helicopter and shoot all of your cars. Because actual car chases in that game, considering all the cars moving about the same speed, is particularly difficult. And there aren't a lot of anti-armor weapons in the game, so killing the cars is perhaps not as interesting as you might previously think. Now, what I'd love to have seen in that is that police using kind of police equipment, like the cops would be chasing down the perps, and they'd use things like stingers and set up roadblocks, but none of that happens in Hotwire. What Hotwire really ends up being is a mobile capture the flag where people drive around in circles. It doesn't help that the levels aren't really all that big, so you can end up easily driving out of bounds on Hotwire, so you see a lot of people just kind of driving around in circles and being general nuisances that way, and it's kind of the only thing they can do. It's not like it's their fault. It's not like they're playing it wrong. It's the most efficient way to play the damn game. You gotta keep your speed up. The best way to do that is to drive around a frickin' circle. I'm pretty sure I saw an enemy there. Ow! Okay, I guess maybe I did. Hopefully he will be distracted by the all sorts of other things in that general direction. And let's not get killed by that vehicle. I think if the game had more diverse game modes that actually had more complexity to them, then you'd be able to make a pretty genuine argument to say that this game deserves to be a full-priced, independent release of its own accord. But they didn't really do that. Even Heist is not that complicated. It's open 2 vaults, and then escape with the stuff. That's really it. That's so disappointing. I mean, you've got a police versus criminals theme. You could do so much with that. Have a look at what SWAT did. Think about a game mode where it's all about non-lethal takedowns and you're actually punished for killing too many people. Think about a game mode that's actually a genuine car chase mode. As I mentioned earlier, think about that. Hotwire is not a car chase mode. It's just a drive around in circles mode. Have it be asymmetrical. Have it be like Rush, where one side has to get away with the cars. Like I have a Gone in 60 Seconds mode. Something like that. You know, where you're dealing with stingers and roadblocks and all that kind of thing. That would be interesting, but what really disappoints me is the lack of actual police equipment. The theme is tacked on. It's especially evident when you play Conquest mode, because it really does genuinely feel like a second-rate Battlefield 4 when you play Conquest mode, and it's inexplicably the most popular mode. I assume it's because people don't know any better, but it really is the most popular mode, and for some reason people seem to like it, and I don't get it. Why would you want to play Conquest mode in Hardline, not in Battlefield 4, which has more vehicle variety, more map variety, more weapon variety and is a really cool sort of army versus army mode. This isn't army versus army. This is paramilitary versus paramilitary, and it doesn't even really do that very well because you're still using familiar weapons. You're not using anything outlandish. If you're using improvised weaponry and crazy ghetto stuff, that would be kind of great, but you're not. You're using essentially full-grade military hardware. For God's sake, this has a 50 caliber machine gun on the bloody thing. So it really does feel like I'm part of an army, and it's just a bad army. You know, it's just not as good as the armies in Battlefield 4 is. So they just waste the theme. That's maybe my biggest complaint about it. And then after that, what have you got? You know, if you throw your theme away, what the hell do you have? The answer is not very much, frankly. I'd love to say that you do, but you don't have that very much, because it is very similar to the previous Battlefield games. The guns handle exactly the same. The classes play almost identically. And for God's sake, the operator is the medic. And I'm still consistently annoyed by the fact that one class gets to be so damn useful. And the thing is, it's even more useful this time around because, like, the idea of, like, having dedicated anti-tank and anti-vehicle, not even necessary in Hardline. So, really, the operator in a primarily infantry-focused set of game modes is going to be the most powerful and useful and versatile class, and he is. I love the way Bad Company did it. They made the medic take the support role. They gave him a light machine gun. I would like to see that. You know, give him something weird like designated marksman's rifle. You know, make the class a little bit more difficult to use. Don't make it a ubiquitous class where you can dump down health, resurrect all your friends, and be like the most effective man in a firefight because the assault rifles are really, really good. Don't do that because then you marginalize all the other classes and nobody wants to bloody play them anymore. That's the real problem with it. So when people say DLC, I agree with them. I really, really do. I think the best business model for this game would have been as follows. Cut out the damn single player. You might be asking, why the hell am I not talking about the single player? Because it doesn't have a field of view option. We'll look at the options menu in a moment. The multiplayer has the standard field of view options, which is great, but single player doesn't. It has some of the biggest pistol models you've ever bloody seen, and the game made me nauseous after a few minutes. So I haven't been playing the campaign, which is a bit of a shame, because apparently they went down some weird kind of stealth route with some of the stuff, which sounds actually kind of fun, but ultimately, if you do not include proper field of view options in your game, what you're going to find is that people have problems playing it if they suffer from simulation sickness. There's a reason why I rabbit on about this all the time. People make a meme out of it. They say, oh, you're obsessed with it. I'm obsessed with it because games make me feel motion sick. I don't want to feel sick while I'm playing my entertainment, and it's an easily fixed problem. Like, it's not like it's outlandishly unheard of. Even if you're not motion sick, there's a good reason to want field of view, because you want to see more. We're not playing on consoles. We don't need this really thin field of view. We're not sitting so far away from our television for that to be an issue. Wider field of view is better. You get to see more of the playing field, and that's why they have that option in the multiplayer. And we win by a large margin, because the other team sucks. But there you go. Nice. At least I can say that this game mode's fairly objective-focused. But yeah, anyway, back to the point. This is what I would do. I would take away the single player completely. I would take the current product, and I would release it as a $30 expandalone. And I'd say, this is Battlefield Hardline. It's not a sequel. It's not an annual $60 iteration with a $40 premium. I mean, for God's sake, they have Battlefield Premium for this thing, and they already have 4 or 5 DLCs planned, and they're doing the whole Battle Packs thing as well. And a digital deluxe edition, which costs $10 more. So they've got all of that stuff going for it. They are treating this like a full-priced release, and the content, in my opinion, does not justify a full-priced release. It really does not. You have a very similar game, and while Call of Duty has done that in the past, certainly the difference between COD Ghosts and COD Advanced Warfare is significant enough to justify, in my honest opinion, a full-priced release. Because it's a very, very different game. They really went out of their way to actually innovate for once. What a weird situation we're in, where the innovation within a game is found with Call of Duty and not with Battlefield. Battlefield seems to be stuck in a rut, which is odd, because Battlefield has done futuristic, it's done the past, it's done World War II. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, we're due for Battlefield 1944. But I don't know where the hell that is. They decided to go with Hardline, which again was a wasted opportunity. And you could have justified that $60 if you'd been inventive. And they're not. Oh, these game modes are not that good. I wish they were. I really do. I tried to find a single game mode that actually blew me away, and I couldn't do it. I just could not bloody well do it. They're okay. Oh, Blood Money is okay. Heist is okay. Hotline I'm not a fan of. I've tried the 5-on-5 modes. They're generally just worse versions of freaking Counter-Strike. So, not even keen on that. Why the police have parachutes, no one has any fucking idea. I mean, come on. If you're going to at least pretend to be a separate game to Battlefield, at least take out stupid things like parachutes. Police don't have bloody parachutes. There's no effort to adhere to the theme here, and that's what would have made the game truly different and truly special. Now, that might happen in the DLC. Maybe. Is there going to be anyone around to play the DLC? Well, that's a different matter entirely. Will people actually stick around and play Hardline? Because Battlefield 4's kind of matured now. Now, they've made some effort, they've made the game a little bit better, and they've, well, you know, it's not perfect, but, you know, they're kind of getting there with it, which is nice. It's patched, it's less terrible than it was on launch. It now has 4 DLC to actually bring variety to the game as well. It's got a fully featured set of maps. And it seems like you should follow the old rule. Buy the last one. Don't buy the new one. Wait a year, and then get it. Because by that point, it'll have all its DLC. It'll have been on sale multiple times, and it was probably worth your effort at that stage. When I go and play Hardline, all I think to myself is, why on earth am I not playing Battlefield 4 with the DLC? Because it offers more. Pretty much across the board. Now, if you want more Battlefield, it's not like Hardline is a bad game. I've been ragging on it a lot, but I'm ragging on it because, frankly, it's lazy, it doesn't do a great deal with the theme, and that's a crime in and of itself. Because it's a theme that was begging for it. When was the last good police game that you played? Was it SWAT 4? I bet it was SWAT 4, wasn't it? Probably SWAT 4. What a shame. So many ideas that could be stolen there, but if we take away all of that, let's just forget that the theme exists. Let's just forget that Battlefield 4 exists. Is it a good shooter in and of its own right? Sure. Yeah, it is. It's a good, solid shooter, and the game is more infantry-focused than the previous Battlefield titles, which for a lot of people is probably going to be a huge deal. Do police helicopters have flares? Probably not. But then again, a Stinger probably wouldn't be lying around on a random island, so I suppose that's acceptable. Let's see if this helicopter pops up again. Maybe we can pop him one. It's a perfectly serviceable shooter in and of its own right. The guns feel fairly reasonable. They have decent recoil. They take a decent amount of skill to use, at least at long ranges. Bullet drop is a big deal. The sniper rifles don't feel colossally overpowered. You need to pling a couple of shots in people. So the professional class seems like it needs a decent amount of skill to play. Although, I question the gun variety, and it's really silly that a game like this lacks gun variety, because if you're looking at a military shooter, then generally speaking, you have to at least try to adhere, at least to some degree, to military doctrine, and actually use the weapons the militaries use. When you're dealing with sort of paramilitary forces, civilian forces, and criminal forces, I don't see why you would possibly need any of that. You can give them whatever guns they damn well please. One of them could be running around with a Garand, for God's sake. A Gerand, actually, I believe is the name of that, not a Garand. Thank you very much. I just cleared that damn room out. You all suck. You could be running around with all manner of silly guns. And everyone would accept it because they're criminals. They use what they got. Now, give the police... if you're going to go with the asymmetrical thing, and it looks like they insist on doing it, so hey... Give the criminals a bunch of really interesting, weird-ass options, and give the police gear, which includes non-lethal weapons, and give them an incentive to use them. The game doesn't do that, it just gives you really standard guns. There's really not an interesting weapon in this game that isn't used in God knows whatever other shooter that you could possibly imagine. Again, missed opportunity. And also, frankly, you gotta be kidding me! It just ends up being a bad value proposition in comparison to the other Battlefield games. Maybe in a year, when it's had all of its DLC and goes on sale, we might see a bunch of really interesting game modes. But as it stands, this is a Battlefield game through and through, and that's all it is. And it could have been a lot more than that. It really could have. You've got a new studio behind it, hopefully with some fresh ideas. They had a bunch of extra time to make it. And to me, it sounds like they were reined in by On High that says, well, you gotta be careful. You might upset people if you rock the boat. Like, there's no bravery here. And that's such a bloody shame, because Call of Duty showed bravery. What? Do you expect it ever to do that? No, you don't. COD's the series that plays it safe. Apparently that's not true now. Apparently it's now Battlefield. And that's the biggest problem I've got with this. This game has no guts. But if you are desperate to play a slightly different multiplayer shooter, it's not like the game is bad at what it does. Yeah, it lacks variety, it doesn't have enough maps, it's got like 9, it doesn't have enough game modes as far as I'm concerned. Doesn't have enough weapons, doesn't have enough class variety, doesn't have enough vehicle variety, doesn't have enough attachment variety. That's like a lot of stuff that's bad, actually. Just like, hey, when I say that back, it actually sounds a lot worse than I initially thought. But it's still a serviceable multiplayer shooter. If you want to pay $60 for a serviceable multiplayer shooter, when you can pay a lot less for much better, more interesting multiplayer shooters. I wouldn't bother with that, personally. And maybe you can endure the campaign. I can't, personally, but hey, maybe you can. Let's have a look at the options menu before we go. Performance is thankfully not a problem in Hardline. Obviously, the Frostbite engine has had a good amount of time to mature. There are NVIDIA drivers available for this, so there's full SLI support, which means the game runs really well. I personally found I got a I got more than 60 frames per second on 2560 by 1440 resolution, which is, you know, as you're well aware, I think at this point, like, relatively high resolution. It's not 4K, but it's pretty close. And running on a 1080p on SLI 980s, I get about 100 frames a second on what's basically maximum. So let's have a look at the options menu before we clock out and give our final conclusions on this. You're gonna find a very similar options menu to what you do in Battlefield 4. It's pretty much the same. You got all you can imagine. You got a field of view slider that goes all the way up to 120, which is nice. I set it around 95. That's what I found to be particularly cool. There's no weapon model scaling, which I find to be annoying. It obviously scales a little bit with the field of view, but I'd like to be able to shrink down the weapon models a little bit. They're a little bit excessive. You do have field of view scaling with aim down sights, which is a nice little feature there. Colorblind option is also available, and it's actually multiple colorblind, which is great. That's there are multiple forms of color deficiency, as it's called. So it's great to have multiple colorblind options there. That's a really nice inclusion. I'm very happy to actually see that. And I'd like to show you the rest of the options menu, but this loadout screen forces you to sit here for 20 seconds looking at freaking nothing. If you press escape, it literally quits you out of the game, which is infuriating! Well, I did fairly well, at least 4 for 4, and then got a pretty good score. Pilgrim, wow, you are a bit of a beast. You're kind of terrifying there. But, hey, at least I did reasonably well that time around. So once we get into the next map, I'll actually be able to look at the rest of the options menu. But like I said, the performance has been totally fine, which is to be expected. It uses the same engine as Battlefield 4. If you had good Battlefield 4 performance, chances are you're going to have good performance here. You have generally smaller maps, less vehicles, and less going on anyway, so I can't see why you'd expect to have anything worse. But yeah, the game runs absolutely fine on PC, at high resolutions, at high frame rates. This is all running on Ultra, with everything turned on to maximum, as you can see. There's not much missing here, if at all, really. I mean, I'd like to see a separate option for anisotropic filtering. They tend to, like, bundle that in with stuff like post-processing and everything like that, which I really don't like. But, yeah, for the most part, they have all the graphics options you could possibly desire. Audio, they've always been great with audio. Battlefield games have always been very good with audio indeed. You've got a lot of options. You got the good old war tapes, which massively compresses everything. I love the sound of war tapes. I know a lot of audiophiles will tell me it's inaccurate, but I think war tape sounds phenomenal. I loved having it on in Bad Company too. I love it here. It's good. So you can do that. You can change your speaker configuration between stereo and surround sound. You do have built-in voice over IP that works very well. Obviously, I turn that off for the video, but it does work well. I would recommend using it in squads. It's pretty damn good. And you have a lot of gameplay options as well in terms of customization of the UI. If you know, there's one thing I'll say about Battlefield, they do that very, very right. You can turn a lot of this stuff off, which is fantastic. You can even do click button to steady scope as opposed to hold button. Same with weapon zoom. Lovely toggles. Very, very nice. Hey, at least I like the options menu, right? Yeah, there you go. And you got full key bindings, mouse key bindings, joystick key bindings, on foot, in vehicle, in helicopter, full spectator mode. Yeah. I mean, it's about as close to a perfect options menu as you can possibly imagine. And as I say, I particularly appreciate this colorblind option here. And it even demonstrates to you whether or not it's going to work for you by having options down the bottom. That's great. Every game should have this. And I applaud Visceral for including this in their game. That's really, really cool. So, conclusion. Sad to say it, but the cynics that said this could have been DLC, for once, you're right, as far as I'm concerned. It bloody well could have been. Absolutely. It's not because they wanted to make a $60 annual iteration, sell you a $40 season pass, and hope to get an extra 10 from the digital deluxe edition. That's what they wanted. That's EA's decision. And frankly, I don't agree with their decision, and I think it's going to hurt them in the long run. It's going to hurt the Battlefield franchise in the long run, because people are going to stop buying these damn things on release because they're just frankly not worth it. You know, they don't offer a good enough value proposition in comparison to the previous. You want people to switch over annually. Why would you do that if the package you're offering is worse? It offers less. You know, why would you? Yeah, you can't scare me. Thank you very much. You probably wouldn't. I wouldn't. I wouldn't recommend it, not in its current state. Give it a year. See what DLC comes out. See if they actually come up with some genuine game modes. See if they actually respect the theme and they get some guts in them. And decide, hey, you know what? Maybe we can be more than just another Battlefield game. Maybe we can be more than two paramilitary organizations battling it out over, frankly, the same sort of maps and the same sort of objectives as we did in our previous game. Maybe we can be more than just an annual franchise iteration. As it stands, though, this should have been a damn expand alone. It really should have been. $30, I would say, for this. In its current state, with its current content. That's what I would pay for it. If I was feeling like paying for a game like this. But frankly, I played enough of Battlefield 4 to have kind of had my fill. So Hardwire doesn't make me more interested in the franchise again. It really doesn't. And why would it? What else does it really offer? Other than some variants and gadgets. Stuff that we've already seen before in things like Battlefield 2 Special Forces. Things like grappling hooks. I want to see something different. And Battlefield Hardline doesn't offer that. It is that simple. Battlefield Hardline, ladies and gentlemen, available for $60 or your regional equivalent. My name has been TotalBiscuit. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time.